Hello everyone and welcome to the Ticker.com's news channel on YouTube. On this channel, we review stock markets and discuss financial news, market trends, and economic data from Wall Street to Global Street. So let's dive in. We will begin our review of global economy with key releases in the US, Europe, China, Japan, and India. The flurry of central bank policy decisions hovered market sentiment this week. Global markets extended weekly gains after the Federal Reserve held its key lending rates steady and signaled possible multiple rate cuts in 2024 and 2025. The European Central Bank also held its key lending rate steady and trimmed inflation and economic growth outlook, but also pushed back calls for lowering interest rates in early 2024. The Bank of England left its rate unrevised and stressed that the rates are likely to stay higher for an extended period of time. The Swiss National Bank held its rate, but the Norges Bank lifted rates by 25 basis points. The Central Bank of Russia hiked rates by 100 basis points, and the Central Bank of Brazil lowered rates by 25 basis points. Moreover, China reported mixed economic data indicating uneven rebound after the consumer spending growth fell short of expectations, and investors hope that the People's Bank of China will provide a larger stimulus in the months ahead. India's industrial output surged in October, but manufacturing sector activities remained in contractionary phase in Japan. U.S. stock markets were encouraged by the steady decline in overall inflation in November, as you can see in the accompanying chart. We now review developments in financial markets and how the markets were impacted by policy decisions by central banks. The yield on the 10-year U.S. Treasury dropped to a 4-month low after the Fed signaled possible multiple rate cuts in 2024 and 25. Gold hovered above the 2,000 mark on the dollar weakness and the easing of Treasury yields. Crude oil traded volatile amid signs of rising supplies from the U.S., Brazil, Guyana, and Iran, and rising global demand growth estimates by the IEA. Natural gas prices in Europe fell below €35 per megawatt hour and declined for the 9th week in a row amid signs of stable demand and elevated storage levels. The euro rebounded to $1.09, the level last seen in mid-September after the U.S. Treasury yields edged lower on the expected rate cuts in 2024. The yen rebounded to 144 against the dollar, a 5-month high after the Federal Reserve officials indicated multiple rate cuts are likely in the next year. The S&P 500 index and the Nasdaq Composite extended gains for the 7th consecutive week in the hopes that interest rate cuts are likely in the 2024 and 2025. European markets retained upward bias, and the benchmark indices in France advanced for the 5th week in a row, but the index in Germany closed down on mixed economic reports. The Nikkei 225 average fell in Tokyo and struggled ahead of the monetary policy decisions from the Bank of Japan next week, and manufacturing sector activity remained contractionary, as I mentioned before. China market indices extended losses for the 4th week in a row, despite the rebound in industrial production and retail sales and steady growth in fixed asset investments and stable jobless rate. The Hang Seng Index rebounded 4%, tracking gains on Wall Street in the last week. India market indices extended rally for the 8th week in a row on economic growth optimism and surging industrial production. We now review the latest earnings releases, merger deals, and several technology companies were in focus as well. Adobe edged lower after the company reported stellar quarterly results but issued muted 2024 outlook. Alphabet was in focus after a federal jury in California ruled against the company's Google Android App Store filed by Fortnite video game maker Epic Games. Oracle Corp declined after the database giant reported weaker than expected revenue in the fiscal second quarter. Macy's jumped after the department store retailer received a buyout offer of $5.8 billion from 2 private equity groups. Occidental Petroleum Corp. said it agreed to buy Crown Rock for $12 billion and expand its Permian Basin production portfolio. Scholastic Corp dropped after the publishing company reported a decline in revenue in its latest quarter, and the company lowered its annual revenue growth estimate. Quanex Building Products declined after the building products maker reported higher than expected revenue but did not provide annual outlook, citing macroeconomic uncertainties. Vir Biotechnology announced various steps to reduce its operating expenses by at least $40 million annually. Solar stocks advanced for the second day in a row after the Federal Reserve signaled multiple rate cuts in the next year. Merck and Moderna released a mid-stage report showing experimental cancer vaccine helped to lower the risk of death or relapse in patients with skin cancer after 3 years. Vivendi increased after the French media giant announced a plan to study the separate entities as independent listed companies, Canal Plus, Havas, and an investment company. Tesla recalled about 2 million vehicles to fix an autopilot defect. Pfizer decreased after the pharmaceutical company reported a weaker than anticipated 2024 revenue outlook. Twilio hired investment advisor Catalyst to defend against activist investors. Hasbro, the toy maker, announced its plan to lay off 1,100 workers. Lucid Group, the electric vehicle maker, said Chief Financial Officer Sherry House is resigning effective immediately. Looking ahead next week, economic news is expected to dominate headlines again, and few companies are scheduled to release earnings. In the U.S., investors are looking forward to Personal Income and Outlays report, featuring the Fed's preferred inflation measure PCE price index, final estimate of the third quarter GDP, building permits, and durable goods orders. Reports are scheduled to be released next week as well. In the euro area, final inflation data, construction output, and current account updates are widely anticipated. In the UK, inflation update, retail sales, current account, and final update on the third quarter GDP growth will take center stage. In Asia, the Bank of Japan is scheduled to announce its policy decision. The People's Bank of China is expected to hold loan prime rate steady, and the minutes from the Reserve Bank of India will be scrutinized for the monetary stance outlook. You can read daily U.S. and global financial market news, earnings calendars, stock movers, and economic updates on ticker.com and 123jump.com. You can also get the latest financial books on Redera.com and keep up with financial industry events on eventsinamerica.com. That's all for today, and we will see you next